Imagine it's 2:13 a.m. in the morning and your house is invaded. Do you know what to do? Tonight, something very basic is happening in America. People are locking their doors earlier. They're installing brighter lights. They're buying longer screws for their strike plates. They're texting their neighbors when a strange car circles the block twice, and they're doing it quietly. Not because the government told them to, not because the media warned them to, and not because instinct is louder than headlines, but there's a new book called Dealing with Burglary and Home Invasion Robbery by Scott Fritz. It's not a flashy book, it's not political, it doesn't scream, and it doesn't virtue signal. It asks a much simpler question. What happens if somebody kicks in your door at 2:13 a.m., and why is nobody talking about that? For decades, Americans operated under a social contract. You work hard, you buy a home, you raise your kids. And when you close the door at night, that's your space, it's your sanctuary. But lately, something feels different. Crime statistics get debated endlessly. Depending on who you ask, everything is either collapsing or perfectly fine. But here's what's measurable. Ring camera sales are up. Private security is booming, firearm ownership remains historically high, and reinforced doors and home hardening products are a growth industry. That doesn't happen in a culture that feels secure. It happens in a culture that feels exposed. And that's where Fritz's book lands, not in fear, but in preparation. And here's the uncommon and uncomfortable truth. Burglary and home invasion are not the same thing. Burglary is theft. Home invasion is confrontation. One is about property. The other is about power. A burglar hopes you're gone. A home invader doesn't care. And that psychology difference matters. Because most people plan for the first and freeze at the second. Fritz argues something that used to be common sense. Criminals prefer easy targets. They look for predictability. They look for routine. They look for darkness. They look for doors that flex. And if that offends you, if you think saying that sounds like blaming the victim, ask yourself this one thing. Would you rather be morally validated or physically safe? Let's walk through a scenario. It's 1:47 in the morning and your dog barks. Not casually, but that bark. Your brain wakes up before your body does. And what happens next? Well, do you have a plan? Does your spouse, do your kids know where to go? Are you about to improvise under adrenaline? Fritz's core message isn't be paranoid. It's something more grounded. Remove improvisation from crisis, because crisis punishes hesitation. He talks about layered defense, not in tactical cosplay terms, but in practical ones. Perimeter, exterior, interior, last resort. Lighting that eliminates blind approaches. Doors reinforced beyond builder-grade screws. Windows that don't shatter with a shoulder check. A designated safe room, clear routes. None of this is radical. I mean, it's boring, it's mechanical, but it's very adult, and yet most people don't do it. Why is that? Because preparation forces you to admit something uncomfortable. The system may not arrive in time. Police response times vary widely. Officers do their jobs, but they can't teleport. This isn't Star Trek. They show up after a call is made, after a delay, after movement. That is not anti-police, that's physics. So the real question becomes, who's responsible for the first 90 seconds? You are. There's also a psychological layer here that no one wants to touch. We've trained generations to prioritize politeness over survival. Don't be rude. Don't assume bad intent. Don't escalate. All admirable in social settings. But criminals weaponize hesitation. Fritz's points out that reconnaissance happens before entry. Strange knocks at odd hours. Lost, quote unquote, delivery drivers asking if you live alone. People testing handles in daylight. Most of the time, nothing happens, but sometimes that was the rehearsal. And ignoring rehearsal doesn't cancel opening night. Now, let's get something straight. Preparing your home does not mean living in fear. In fact, it's the opposite. Prepared people sleep better. The irony is this: the more capable you are, the calmer you become. Because fear thrives in ambiguity. When you've walked through the plan, when you know where you're going, who's calling 911, what you're grabbing, and what you're not, panic has less room to grow. And that's not aggression, that's stability. That's another uncomfortable reality. Some home invasions are not random, they're targeted. Contractors who notice valuables, acquaintances who talk too much, social media posts, broadcasting travel plans. We've turned our private lives into data streams. Out of town for 2 weeks, Cabo YOLO. Well, congratulations, so is your house. Fritz emphasizes reducing signal, not hiding, not withdrawing from society, just thinking one step ahead. Security isn't secrecy, it's friction. You don't need to be impenetrable. You need to be harder than the next house. Criminals are opportunists, not martyrs. So now let's address the obvious tension in modern America. There is a cultural divide between people who believe in preparation equals paranoia and people who believe ignoring risk equals negligence. The truth sits somewhere in the middle. You can support criminal justice reform and still lock your doors. You can believe in compassion and still reinforce your hinges. These ideas are not mutually exclusive, but the conversation has become politicized. Everything is. Even self-protection. And that's absurd because at 2:13 a.m., ideology doesn't matter. Politics don't matter. But response does. The most powerful idea in Fritz's book might be this: don't wait for the worst day of your life to make the first decision about it. And that's it. Decide now. Will you retreat or clear? Will you shelter or escape? Where is your phone? What if it's downstairs? What if the power is out? What if there are multiple intruders? Thinking through those questions doesn't summon danger. It reduces chaos. And chaos is what criminals rely on. A society where millions of citizens feel compelled to harden their homes is not necessarily collapsing, but it is changing. Trust feels thinner. Institutions feel slower. Community matters more than it used to. Neighbors who know each other deter more crime than cameras ever will. That might be the most hopeful part of this conversation. Security isn't just hardware, it's human. It's a group text, a porch light, a shared awareness. Prepared communities don't panic, they coordinate. So why is this book resonating? Because it's not ideological. It doesn't scream at you. It doesn't tell you the world is ending. It tells you something much simpler. Take responsibility for the space that you control. Not Washington, not the courts, not the headlines. Your door, your hallway, your plan. That's manageable. That's adult. That's empowering. Being ready is the best medicine. And maybe that's the deeper story tonight. In a time when people feel increasingly powerless over national outcomes, they're rediscovering something local is tangible. The front door still belongs to them. The first 90 seconds still belong to them. The decision to prepare still belongs to them. And that quiet shift away from outrage and towards responsibility might be more significant than any crime statistic. Because security is not about fear, it's about clarity. And clarity in modern America is rare. Thank you for watching all the way to the end. As always, take care of yourselves and each other and build that stack.